Hey, welcome back to the channel. Alright, the video's not going to be like that, but I did realize that I can make it a lot better, so here we are. So what we're talking about today is how to save the maximum amount of space while recording on your Sony camera, or potentially other cameras as well if they use this setting or they have this feature to record in a specific type of file. So there's this file type called H.265. Apple has been using it for a long time and they've adopted it widespread throughout their company's products. It's a file container, so when you record, that's where the file gets compressed into, an H.265 file. And the compression of an H.265 file is superior to a lot of other file types when recording videos. And that's what Apple's always taken advantage of. And now you can take advantage of this file type on your cameras. So Sony cameras normally, and in the past, and pretty much every other camera too, I believe, recorded in a file type called H.264. It's 1 below 5. Obviously, everyone knows 4 is below 5, but that's what the file type is called. H.264 is pretty much the standard across the board for so many products that record video, and it's one of the most compatible file types when uploading. YouTube prefers H.264. But now with your recordings and editing process, you can use H.265 to save a lot of space on your memory card and your hard drive. For me, I'm speaking from a perspective of a Sony ZV-E1 user. So this is how it works on that camera. So obviously on the ZV-E1 you have the option to record in H.264, and it's sort of the base option to record in. But there's another option. You can click on H.265, and when you select H.265, you then are greeted with 2 frame rate options. Now this is interesting because H.265, at least on the ZV-E1, only records in 50 frames per second, or 60 if you're in the US, or 100 frames per second where I am, Australia, that's PAL, or NTSC is 120 frames per second. And the reason why this is interesting is because both of those frame rates are higher than the 24 or 25 frames per second you might be used to filming in, or even 30 frames per second for YouTube, if you're filming for YouTube or anything else, whatever you're filming for. I was used to filming in 25 frames per second. That was my go-to frame rate, but I was recording in H.264. So they've got these higher frame rates that you're dealing with. They don't even offer the 24 or 25 option, but get this, with all those extra frames that you're getting recording in H.265, the files are still smaller than a 24 or 25 frame rate recording in H.264. So what you need to ask yourself is, do you need your recording to look like it was filmed more professionally, like 24 or 25 frames per second, or can you get away with a higher frame rate? On YouTube, I think you can get away with a higher frame rate. If you're YouTubing and you're not doing something super professional, or you do need slow motion in a slower frame rate timeline like 24 or 25, then filming in the H.265 option for your file type at 50 frames or even 100 frames per second could be a really good option for you. Now this video is going to be in 50 frames per second. I'm not sure going forward if I am going to 100% swap over from my 25 frames per second, and it might be a certain use case scenario. I'm not 100% sure yet how exactly I'm going to be using it, but it is a massive space saving feature. And going on long trips, like when I went to Japan for 6 whole weeks and I recorded pretty much the entire time, having my camera record in H.265 would have been a huge help. And for some silly reason, I didn't even think about it at the time. I was like, nah, I'm recording in 25 frames per second. H.264 doesn't matter, whatever, I'm just gonna record like this. Yeah, I don't know, I feel like vlogs can be any frame rate, doesn't really matter. And the fact that I'm doing YouTubing pretty much, that's all I'm uploading to. Technically, I do upload to TikTok here and there, but 50 frames per second is fully supported by YouTube. And my recordings don't have to look professional. They only need to be recorded efficiently. And I think having 50 frames per second at a much smaller file type could actually be a lot more beneficial for just in general filming, uploading time, the speed of everything. Having everything more streamlined because everything is smaller. I love that. Anyway, moral of the story is, if you swap to H.265, you will only possibly have the options of 50 or 60 frames to 100 and 120 frames per second. However, you will have a much smaller file size that you'll have to work with, which is beneficial in a lot of different ways, including if you have to save it on the same SD card or a limited number of SD cards if you go traveling, something like that, then it's well worth it, I would say, to change over to that. Just note that if you do film in this frame rate, there is one potential problem you might run into in the future, which is only conditional, but if you put this footage into a 24 or 25 frames per second timeline, the footage will start to look unnatural. So normally at 24 or 25 frames per second, you'd film at 1/50. For this 50 or 60 frame rate footage, you're filming at 1/100, or you should be, to make it look more natural or normal. If you drop this footage into a 24 or 25 frame rate timeline, what's gonna happen is the footage is gonna drop the excess frames that you filmed, but it's gonna keep the same shutter speed. And that is unfortunately not changeable in post, and you're going to have to deal with some slightly weird looking footage. I'm not sure if that's very obvious information, but I ran into this problem myself, and I've seen other people post about it online, but not a lot. So if you haven't heard that before, now you know that that's the problem you could run into. The only other potential tiny problems that you might lose a little bit of light intake when you use a higher shutter speed if you're filming in 60 or 50 frames per second. But that's neither here nor there when you can kind of compensate with ISO and aperture size. And that's it. That's how you can save a lot of space if you can deal with the caveats and the potential problems you might run into. If you're not going to deal with that stuff, then go for it, and I think I'm going to do the same. Like, as I'm talking about this to you, I'm slowly convincing myself that this is a good idea to just go with this, and why not film in 50? It's more smooth and less blurry, and when you're panning around vlogging, I think it's beneficial to not have to have the viewer go like, what the hell did I just see? He whipped the camera around too fast. You know what I mean? And I noticed a lot of that when I was in Japan. When I was filming and vlogging, even I was like, geez, that's blurry. So yeah, I'm now thinking I'm gonna adopt this. Anyway, I guess you'll know very soon when you see my next video. Talk to you later. Bye.